Welcome to the Go Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Charles Scott. On this podcast, I interview exceptional leaders navigating ambition, resilience, and growth. The goal is to help you go beyond your perceived limits. And as always, this show is sponsored by the 90% rule, helping leaders escape the grind of the ambitious person's trap and instead spend over 90% of your finite time on things you like, you're good at, and you find meaningful. What's the ambitious person's trap, you ask? That's when you undermine your physical health and emotional health in pursuit of your professional goals. The antidote is the 90% rule. Go to executivementorcharlescott.com to learn more. So on today's show, our guest is Monique de Maio. She's a multi-talented person, founder and CMO of On Demand CMO. She's the author of The 7 Secrets to Creating a Life You Love, a practical guide for women in leadership. And also she's the podcast host of Possibilities with Monique de Maio. So Monique, it's wonderful to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Charles. It's so good to be here.
Thank you. And I'll ask about your work in a minute, but before I do, I always love to start with this question. If you could go back in time and give advice to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give?
You know, it's funny. I think I've heard this answer on my podcast as well when I ask women that, what would you tell your 30-year-old self? 18 is so long ago. I would say, you just have to have faith, have confidence that it's all going to work out. The stress that I put on myself as an 18-year-old, and I know a lot of people listening to your show because they're overachievers and they're type A personalities, they have all that in common with us. And so I would say, chill out. It's going to be fine. You're going to do great. Trust yourself. Don't stress. And I have, I call it let go of the immigrant-itis. Being an immigrant, you have an accelerated sense of overachieving and worry and stories about your limiting abilities or limitations. And if I had to, talk to that 18-year-old human, I would say, chill the hell out.
I love it, but in the most loving way.
But in the loving way.
Exactly. No, and your book goes into this, in I think a really wonderful way too. The 7 secrets includes this mindset, of course, is a major one. And you said your internal narratives and your external narratives. I noted down too, and so you get both. And sometimes the external narratives don't help, but sometimes the external narratives are fine, and the internal narratives get in the way, right? So.
It's so true.
Well, I'm going to ask you more about your book in just a minute. But all right, so will you tell me more about On Demand CMO? So how did it start, and what is your vision?
So I started the company quite by accident because I was loving my job. I was the publisher of a magazine called Brand Week. It was a marketing magazine. I loved it. I had a great career. Unfortunately, I worked for some unfavorable humans, and there was a double standard in those days. It was the rules that the boys operated under, and then the rules that I got to operate under, and they weren't to my advantage at all. So I said, you know what? I need to be out of here. It's not good for my mental health. It's not good for my life. It's not good for what I want to accomplish. Even though I love my job, I need to quit. And so I started On Demand CMO in the manner that I wanted a marketing agency to be, because in those days you paid, in those days it was like $10,000 a month. You got an agency on retainer, and you got what you got, and you don't get upset. You get what you get. You don't get upset. And that really wasn't the way I wanted to run my business. I wanted to run my business in the way that the customer got what they needed, not what they needed, not only what they wanted, but what they needed versus what I was, it was convenient for me. That's not the way you work, customer centric. So On Demand CMO is a business to business marketing consulting firm where I help founders and enterprise companies understand their value proposition, understand how to go to market, launch new products, new services, increase their valuations, sales enablement, meaning, how do you get your salespeople to align with your vision and your product or services? How do you make money? So my approach, because I ran a sales and marketing organization in my previous life, I was like, sales and marketing need to be 2 legs on the same person. If I'm giving you marketing advice that's not going to make the cash register ring, I should be fired. So literally, we have clients that are retained for 8 years, 9 years, whatever. And literally, I have no contracts with them. I have no written, binding nonsense. If you don't like me and I don't like you in 30 days, we're free to go elsewhere. That is fine. because
Wow.
guess what? I'm going to keep proving my value month over month. So that's why we have clients for 8 or 9 years in a row, right? And
Yeah.
so that's why we get asked back, why does a CEO say, you were part of the reason why I got valued so highly and why I was
Mhm,
able to sell my business for as
mhm,
much as I did?
mhm.
Because you were able to tell my story. You were able to prove that I was a subject matter leader, a subject matter expert. So that kind of thing, right? So I
Yeah.
love what I do.
Mhm.
And then the other side of it is, coaching women on how to navigate the corporate
Yeah.
environment. And
Yeah.
that is
You
a
lived it.
separate thing. That's my passion, not necessarily what on-demand CMO does day to day, but that's what I do as well.
Yeah, in fact, that's a good segue to your book, which I want to ask you about too. So I mentioned it's The Seven Secrets to Creating a Life You Love, and the subtitle is A Practical Guide for Women in Leadership. And you've obviously lived this yourself. And so you're in your podcast, you talk about like real people with real stories, right? So you've lived the real experience.
Yes.
And one of the things I loved about what you wrote, you said, imagine your life serving you, not the other way around.
Yes.
And so your book puts a lot of emphasis on individual choices and the accumulation of what you call micro moments, which I love. So these micro moments add up over time, but so it's in any given moment, right? You're making these decisions, and I'm thinking for women leaders in particular. So how do you distinguish between something in your life that you should take responsibility for redesigning, right? So this is
Right.
where you have full agency versus a systematic constraint that you shouldn't internalize as your problem. And so how do you decide whether to adapt, push back, or walk away in that context?
So very large question. We're going to try to unpack it as best as we can.
Okay,
I
sorry.
no, no, it's all good. I love it because it's really quite on point. I have a thesis that life is not easy, but it can be made simple.
Hmm.
And that is something that most women will be like, oh, you don't understand my life. I'm like, yeah, I really do understand your life. I really do. Had 2 kids, had to manage a household, had a career, had a commute, had to, deal with all the things that we deal with in life. And who gets served last? Usually the woman. We have this need to be in control and help all the people around us. So I believe there's 7 areas in life where I believe that you have agency. So one is your voice. What is your story about yourself? What are
Hmm.
your choices? What do you these micro moments? I'm going to unpack that in one quick second.
Hmm.
Your job, your internal narratives, your external narratives, your environment. Those are things you have control over. So,
Hmm.
how do you approach that? You have to reverse engineer what you want and then how you get it, the micro decisions that you make every day. Let me give you an example. Somebody says, I want to retire at 60. Great, wonderful. You want to retire at 60. Okay, great. So when you get to that moment where you're going to buy your first house and the bank tells you, this is an example that I gave from my life, the bank
Hmm.
tells you you can afford $500,000 mortgage. Do you go for that or do you buy the house that where you do a $250,000 mortgage and you have money in the bank? Because if
Hmm.
you listen to what other people are saying or doing or buying or whatever, that's great for them, but maybe they don't have the same goals you do. So
Hmm.
these micro moments where you're in the moment and you're buying your first house, are you listening to the bank officer or are you listening to what you know to be truth based on your overall goals? If you want to put your kids through college and you don't want them to have debt, that means that you have to have that money to be
Hmm.
able to do that. So did you start the savings account on the at the 529 for that child when they're
Yep.
1? Because if you
Hmm.
haven't, it's all lip service. So when people say they want to do something or they can't stop working or they don't like their jobs, they have agency, they have choice in the matter. It depends on the decisions that you've made leading up to that macro moment because the micro moments are leading up to the macro moment. So when you're about to have a nervous breakdown at your corporate job because you're miserable because you've made these micro decisions. Oh, I bought a boat. I bought a beach house. I did this. I did that. I did. Oh, now you're stuck. But leading up to that, you weren't stuck. You just made these micro decisions that now you
Hmm.
have a macro outcome, which is you're stuck.
Hmm.
So let's unpack where we want to be and be intentional about the choices that we make on a day to day basis. So, When do you push back? You push back when it's not serving you. You create when it's not serving you.
Mm-hmm.
You redesign when it's not serving you. You have to have the awareness of what is and what is not serving you, right? So people in your life, jobs, careers, purchases, all those things are decisions that you get faced with every single day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you read James Clear's Atomic Habits, love that book. But that's like a mini moment. That's like, okay, what am I going to, I want to be an athlete. Okay, great. What's the first step in being an athlete? Well, you got to go buy sneakers in order to go for a run, in order to,
Sure.
so like, it's not like you don't wake up one day and be like, oh, I'm going to run a marathon. No, there's like a whole boatload of other little mini moments where leading up to that marathon, you've made a decision. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
mood. It's not like you wake up in the morning and be like, I want to go to the gym at 5 a.m. No, I don't think anybody says that. But they made a decision that they wanted to be an athlete. So you reverse engineer where you want to go, and then you make these micro little decisions on a day-to-day basis that line up with what you say you want.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And what I love about it, when I just think about the core message through everything you said, is that you have agency. You have the ability to choose. So rather than the narrative being, I'm a victim, it's out of my control, everything you're emphasizing are choices that a person can make, that they have the agency to make. And that's empowering too, and including the internal narrative, which sometimes is a victim narrative, right? But if you can flip it where I have agency, you don't. So I love it. It sounds great. And it's complicated. Life is hard and we make mistakes. I would say, actually, this is a good segue. I'll say, because what I said at the beginning of this podcast was, it's sponsored by the 90% rule, which is the antidote to the ambitious person's trap. And this is a label I've come up with because I've seen this over and over again with the executives I mentor, where they will undermine their physical health and emotional health in pursuit of their professional goals. And when I was looking at your background, Miss Overachiever, if I may call you that, so you put yourself through college in 3 years, not four, while working full time, and you got an MBA while working full time. So I was like, she is definitely a candidate for the ambitious person's trap. It's like, So my question for you is, so as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, have you found it difficult to pursue your professional goals and also take good care of yourself physically and emotionally? In other words, have you been able to avoid the ambitious person's trap? And I will say, if you can't be a great role model, it's totally fine to be an object lesson of what not to do. That's very useful as well. And it's not just you arrive and you're done. It's every single day you have to prove this to yourself. But what's your relationship to this concept, the ambitious person's trap, and have you figured it out in some way that works for you?
Okay, so unpeeling that. So the book I wrote was the book I wished I had when I was in my 30s and 40s. Okay, so we'll just put a pin in that one. Even though I hate that expression. I unfortunately got very, very sick when my son was born. I didn't know what was wrong with me, and I thought I was dying. So my hair started falling out. I had fatigue, unbelievable fatigue. I had no energy, and being a high energy person. So long story was that I was diagnosed with Epstein-Barr and a very bad intolerance to gluten. And back in the day, this is 25 years ago. So that wasn't really sexy to say I am gluten intolerant or I'm gluten free, which is I hate when people say. Anyway, so it led me to, because again the doctor was like, "Oh, this is fine. You're postpartum." That's what I got from my GP. You're postpartum. It's normal.
Okay.
It's just everything is normal. And I said, no, 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 no. This is not normal. This is not me. There is a problem. So I had to go shopping for an MD that had the wherewithal in the practice area that would look at food as a contributor. As a European, I know, and I know that when you have a conversation with a European doctor, they are going to look at nutrition, but here they do not. They want to give you a pill. So that journey led me to an unbelievable awareness and wellness journey that said, I need to take care of myself, because if I don't take care of myself, the infrastructure of my life falls apart.
Right.
My kids will suffer, my husband will suffer, the house will suffer, the career will suffer, the business will suffer, everything goes down in flames. So I have been very intentional about my health since then. I eat well. I have hacks for everything, like make cut up the fruit, cut up the vegetables, make it available in the refrigerator, or you won't eat it. Don't keep, processed foods. Don't eat processed foods. Don't stock them in the house. Don't buy them. I won't eat pork. U.S. pork doesn't, can't do it. The only pork I will ever eat in my life is Spanish. It has to be, Serrano or, Belota, ham, there's
Right.
things that I make choices about because I know pesticides, this, that, and the other thing. So I have been vigilant about fitness and wellness. I did go back and not go back, but when I was in my 40s, because every normal human mom should do with little kids, is I went and studied for my mixed martial arts black belt.
Of course
That's
you
not
should.
normal, right?
Right.
It's not exactly normal, but I had something to prove, I think, to
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
based again on being, bullied as a kid, as an immigrant. It was not an easy time for me. So I realized now with deep work, that I had that to let go of. So once I got the black belt, I literally became calmer and more confident, and I no longer had to fight because I knew I could, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now it was a conversation. So my life is always building in the things that give me joy first. I
Mm-hmm.
know that I'm not a nice human when I don't work out for 3 days in a row. Like, I am just not a nice human. You just do not want to be around me.
It's self-knowledge. Yep.
Self-knowledge, yes. Learn the hard way. So I know that I need to, in my calendar, I need to book fitness as part of my regimen. And I will literally work meetings around what I promised myself I would do. So if I promised myself that I would go cycling with my cycling group at 5:30, I cannot take a 5 o'clock meeting, and I won't take a 5 o'clock meeting. So for me, I was, burnt out and incredibly fatigued and overwhelmed and near crisis at that moment. I'm sure that's why I, fell for the whatever. So that journey and the turning the negative into a positive really helped me establish routines and make micro decisions
Yeah.
about the wellness and the nutrition and the exercise, and allowed me to be a better version of myself, because otherwise I really wasn't really pleasant.
Yeah. Wow. And so what I'm hearing you say is the, lessons learned, like you really learned the hard way, as I guess most of us do. You're reminding me, there's this beautiful quote from the poet Maya Angelou,
Uh-huh.
and she says, forgive yourself for not knowing what you didn't know before you learned it. And so that book that you offered yourself, it's fine. And this is why I asked to start with that question going all the way back to 18. So maybe there's someone listening to this podcast right now who will gain a nugget from your experience and will not have to learn it the hard way. Maybe. And if
I
so,
hope so. I mean, that's literally the reason I wrote the book,
yeah,
Charles. That's
of
literally the reason
course.
I was like, if I can spare 10 women my pain on professional and personal, then I've done my job, right? I've done something. I've contributed to society in some way,
Yeah, it's beautiful.
so.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Okay, great. Well, I could go on talking with you for hours, but this is supposed to be a bite-sized podcast. So I'm going to pause here or stop here.
Sure.
So thank you, Monique.
You're welcome.
How would people check you out? Like if they wanted to learn more about on-demand CMO, where should they go?
So there's two places: ondemandcmo.com,
Mhm.
MoniqueDeMaio.com, DeMaio. I was
Yeah.
like, there's more vowels in my name than humans should have. But yeah, so it's MoniqueDeMaio.com or ondemandcmo.com, or look me up on LinkedIn, Monique DeMaio. I think I'm the only Monique DeMaio out there. Wherever people feel comfortable
Yeah.
connecting. I'm always interested in connecting with other humans like yourself.
I love it. And check out her podcast too. Usually she's on the other side
That's
interviewing
right.
people, but now she has to be the interviewee on her podcast Possibilities with Monique DeMaio, DeMaio. Good. EIEIO. So, okay. All right. So let me end this before my jokes get even worse. I always say if I laugh at my jokes, they're a success.
That's right.
There's a
Yeah.
one audience, and then maybe other people have a different opinion. But thank you very much for being on the show. I appreciate it. So as a reminder to everyone listening, this show is sponsored by the 90% rule, helping leaders escape the grind of the ambitious person's trap and instead spend over 90% of your finite time and energy on things you like, you're good at, and you find me.com. And until next episode, go beyond your perceived limits and live the 90% life.